Can all join palms? And repeat after me. I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Buddha.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Dharma.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
I take refuge in the Sangha.
Keeping the palms joined. Put palms down. All right, good evening, everybody. Nice to see you all here. Someone asked a question on Saturday afternoon. We had finished or Saturday afternoon was our final day, I should say, of it's quite a mouthful, the Engaged Buddhist Training Program. So after 9 weeks of spending time together, these 17 people are fully enlightened. So it's a pretty phenomenal program, just 9 weeks. Totally good. But someone asked a question, and they said, at the end, they said, does this stuff really work? And like many things in life, I said, it works if you do the practice. It's not like Buddhist practice isn't like a philosophical study. It's not a way to add more stuff to think about. Most of you have spent enough of your lives thinking about things. And the mistake that most people I see make with Buddhist practice is it just becomes one more thing to think about and to talk about and to analyze and to roll around in your head over. I said, if you do this every day, it'll change your life. But if it becomes something that you just kind of go to once a week for an hour, no offense to those of you who come here once a week for an hour, you got to start somewhere. I get that. But then what? And it's like many things in life. The more you practice, the more you put it into your life, the more it changes your life. And so, I gave not that much longer of an answer, but, I gave personal experiences of, my teenage years, being angry, depressed, and sitting with some little switchblade I bought to, sitting in the back of the car wanting to kill myself. Now that blade never would have popped a balloon, literally, that's how sharp it was. But the memory was still there. That moment was still there. And so I understand the depth of depression and madness or whatever it is that people sit with. I always say stress, anger, anxiety, sadness, depression, we're all dealing with some level of those 5 things. Some people get all 5 to an extreme, but that's for everybody else to figure out. And so I said, then when I encountered this practice 20 years ago, at least putting it into life 20 years ago, it became an everyday way of life. And initially, just like everybody who comes here, it was a thing I went to. Check it out, go to it, But for me, back in '03, I went every single day to the temple. And I'm not suggesting you all need to come here every single day. You'd leave after a week because I'd give you too much stuff to do. But I went every single day for 2.5 years because I didn't trust my mind out there. And then I moved to a monastery for a year in Taiwan, and then came back and opened up this place the end of 2006. Downtown, 10 years, we moved here 7 years ago. My point wasn't to go through a history of the Dharma Bum Temple, but my point was the fact that it's been an everyday way of life for 20 years. And does it work? Absolutely. But you have to put it into practice. It can't just be something you think about and talk about and analyze. Because while you're doing that, who's suffering? You are. Right? The unenlightened mind that we all roam around with cannot analyze and try to figure out enlightened teachings. I take a very intense approach with Zen path and Zen practice because it's a way of life. Is it easy? Not necessarily. Is it what we would refer to as fun? Not compared to fun I've had in my life. Definitely not. But is it healthy? Is it safe? Does it keep me protected? Absolutely, 100%. Because the mind that was the angry, depressed, miserable person, that mind hasn't gone away. That mind is still there. I just don't spend any time with it. I just do good stuff as much as possible. Because that's what my master taught me. Day one, she said, for someone like you, busy is the best nutrition. So I've stayed busy as much as possible for 20 years, day in and day out, trying to figure out how to do good stuff. Because if I stop and start thinking about everything, then you're back into depression and anger and, oh, poor me, and oh, this didn't work, and oh, that's not working, and oh, look at all this stuff I have to deal with, and look at all these problems. You spend all your time thinking about it. And again, the mistake too many people make, and I see this with thousands of people year in and year out, is they'll spend years trying to understand Buddhism. There's nothing to understand about Buddhism. What is Buddhism about? Getting to understand what?
Your mind?
Yourself, your mind. The nature of your own mind. And there's an entire sutra where the Buddha says to his disciple, find the mind and tell me where it is. And I'll save you a lot of reading, but at the end of the sutra, he never finds it. So there's the catch. This practice is all about understanding the nature of your mind. But the sutra says there's no mind to be found. Well, that makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Glad I clarified that for you. So if there is no mind, what mind is suffering at all? The mind that thinks it's suffering. The mind that thinks it's real. The mind that thinks that all the stories in your head are actual facts. They're all just your perceptions. They're all just your illusions. They're all just your mind driving you crazy. Try to stop. And just do good stuff. As much as possible. And when you find yourself miserable and depressed and angry and sad and confused, just step away, take a couple deep breaths, and go do something good for someone or something else. If you do that day in and day out, your life will drastically change. But this practice has to be outside of a temple that you go to, or any sort of spiritual, practice, whether it's yoga or whatever your thing is, right? It has to be outside of that. It can't just be this thing you're at. It has to become your life. And then suffering ceases to exist. To me, this is what I get from this practice. I look at the statue of the emaciated Buddha every single day, the one sitting here behind me. That's, for me, my role model, my hero. That's who I admire. Because he figured out how to end suffering. And that's why people show up to places like this, because they don't want to suffer. But the challenge is most people don't want to do what's required to suffer less. We want to just keep doing the same things, but have something outside of us solve all our problems. What I'm trying to tell you is those problems are an illusion. They're just stories in your head that don't exist. So abandon those and do good stuff. And that can be fun. At least it can be pleasant. I just see too many people year in and year out over the last 17 years with this journey, or 20 years at that temple as well. They just suffer. And they're really not willing to make the changes necessary. For an hour in here, it sounds great. Wait, I gotta walk outside and be kind and compassionate to myself and everybody else I encounter? That sounds great. How long does that last? I have to forgive myself and everybody else that's caused harm in my life? That sounds great. Looks phenomenal in some Pema Chodron book. And then you walk outside and there's the person that pisses you off and you're like, well, F you, I'm not going to forgive you. And all this stuff that you look at just falls away. Put these things into your life. Don't use Buddhism as another book, another thing to learn about outside yourself. It's all pointing back to you. And the beauty is there's no you to point back to. So, done.
Yes.
That's it. It's so simple. Or just keep trying to figure it all out. Because that's what got you here, is you're trying to figure this all out. Stop. Last thing I'll say is anytime you're in a bad mood, stop trying to figure it out and immediately shift what you're doing. That practice will work. Because sitting there forever trying to figure out why you're in a bad mood and changing all this stuff, you've been doing that your whole life. And that's not working at all. So just stop trying to figure it out and just be present. This is the Zen practice. So good evening, everybody. All of you in virtual land. Thanks for being here. We'll start with the meditation practice. So you can sit and think about everything I just said. And yeah, there's a chat box there. Feel free for those virtual to say hello. Nice to see you all. A couple things for those who might be new with meditation practice. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're not going to float away. You're not going to have any mystical, magical experiences. The mind that races all day long is not going to shut off. Don't judge your practice, meaning don't ask yourself, is it working or not working? Are you doing it right or wrong? We're just going to sit, we're going to breathe. You'll hear sounds inside, sounds outside. This is life. Life is filled with chaos. This practice is learning to get quiet and still within all of the chaos. Posture, you just want to be comfortable. If you are in a cushion, often it helps slide into the front third. Pushing the stomach forward allows the back to straighten. Shoulders are relaxed. If you're on a bench or chair, however you're sitting, just trying to sit up straight, also relaxing the shoulders. Hands are on the knees or lap. I'll guide us as we begin, and we'll settle into a little bit of silence. And starting with your eyes closed if comfortable, or slightly open. Mouth is open or closed. We'll start with taking 3 deep breaths, slowly. And eventually, settle into a natural rhythm of the breath. Knowing throughout the practice, you'll hear sounds. These are not distractions, not disruptions. Simply what's happening around us as we sit. Noticing the mind as it wanders, jumping from thought to thought. Start with gently guiding the attention, focus to the stomach or chest. Breathing in, feel them rise. Breathing out, they fall. Simply continue this practice, observing the sensation of breath. Expecting nothing but to sit and breathe. As the mind wanders, lost in thought, recognize it. Release that thought. Returning attention, focus to the breath. Breathing in, follow breath in. Breathing out, follow breath out. Letting go of expectations. Letting go of judgments. Just sitting. Breathing. keeping the mind alert. Aware of each sound. Each thought. Each physical sensation. Yet concerned with nothing but sitting, breathing. And with the body still, rested, and the speech quiet, aware of all sounds. And the mind learning to settle. Know what it's like to just sit and breathe. Knowing with each breath, there's nothing else to do. Nowhere else to go. And no one else to be. Everything beautiful, exactly as it is. Sitting, breathing. Once again, taking 3 deep breaths slowly. As you slowly open the eyes, slowly beginning to move. The most important with the practice of meditation is to recognize how you feel now, immediately after. Compare this to how you typically feel throughout your day. Recognize the difference, if there is one. Ask yourselves how you prefer to feel every day for the rest of your life. And realize however you feel now, if it's quiet, calm, and still, or a busy mind, racing mind, whatever you're sitting with at this moment, has nothing to do with anything I said. It's nothing to do with how you sit and hold the hands across the legs. It's nothing to do with the sounds around us or anything else for that matter. It's everything to do with your own mind and your own mind's reaction to an external condition. This is what the Buddha called pratitya samuppada, means dependent origination. This is the basis of the Buddha's awakening. The word Buddha simply means awakening. He was a human being no different than any one of us who began to understand why he suffered, why he got angry, sad, depressed, stressed, anxious. He began to understand the causal relationship of all phenomena. And what that means, very simply, for all of us, regardless where you come from or what you believe in or where you think you're going, your whole life is filled with things that happen. You react. More stuff happens, more reactions. That's it. This practice is learning what it's like to respond to something quietly, peacefully, still. Because for most of us, the way you responded to the last 20 minutes is quite different from how you respond to everything else that's happening throughout your day. And so all we're working on is closing the gap to where the way you feel now is closer to how you feel always. Just as driven, motivated, productive, successful. Whatever that means to you in your respective lives. But with a mind that's steady, clear, focused, distracted by nothing, disturbed by no one. This practice is not easy. Training the mind to be present is probably the most difficult thing you'll ever have to train. But it's also the most important. Taking care of mental, emotional health and well-being is most important thing in your life, because that's the start of everything around you. Meditation is free. Buddhist practice is free. It's sitting, breathing, learning to be kind to yourself and everybody else you encounter every moment of your life. And that's it. Once we stop trying to change, fix, control, manipulate everything and everyone around us, is where we spend so much of our time. Hoping they do this, hoping they do that, wishing they would do this, wishing they would do that. So much time trying to control others. Most of us can't even control ourselves. Yet we think for some reason we're going to be able to control what other people do. Once we work on changing our mind and our reaction to the world around us, life becomes very simple. Because then you just become present with what's going on. And you're not carried away by it. There are two things I say during the meditation practice that afterwards that I think are super critical to understand. And most of you know, you've been sitting with me long enough, I say for the most part the exact same thing every single time, and I've been doing it that way for 15 years. I always joke and say it'll be on my tombstone someday, you know. I could be dead and still recite that meditation practice. But letting go of expectations and letting go of judgments. Just sitting and breathing. Most people spend the majority of their day doing nothing but having expectations and judgments of others. That's where your mind goes, constantly expecting other people to be a certain way and judging them for how they are. As a practice, just try, even if you can't do it a whole day, try it. You know, it's like 20 minutes to 8. Try that the rest of tonight. To see, like to watch and catch yourself when you start to have expectations of self or others, but let's just start with others. Watch yourself the rest of tonight when you start to have judgments of others. Get to know these parts of how your mind works, how you expect and judge other people to be a certain way. And when you take just like 2 hours of your day and you watch that, it can be pretty frightening. Because, you know, I mean, I know all of you are pretty close to amazing enlightened bodhisattvas in this room, so I'm not speaking to you all in here, but the other people outside. All those people outside, if you even begin to think about how much time they spend, again, none of you, but how much time they spend judging and expecting, it's scary. It really is. It's a majority of your day, if you're being honest. And it causes a lot of suffering. Not only for you, but the people that you're judging and people that you're expecting things from. So try to liberate yourself from that. This path is about liberation, freedom from suffering, and the causes of our suffering. And a major cause of our suffering is the ignorance that we walk around with, thinking that we should judge and expect things from people. The wisdom says we're just going to allow people to be who they are. Now, it doesn't mean, and I always put a little asterisk in there, so for anyone who doesn't know me or is here for the first time, I'm not suggesting that if you find yourself in abusive situations, if you find yourself in domestic violence situations, if you find yourself in unsafe conditions, I'm not suggesting that you just say, I'm just going to observe you while you do this. No, remove yourself from those situations. But in many cases, in a majority of the things that I'm referring to are not those situations, even though those situations are very prevalent to occur. But most of the stuff that we're judging and critiquing and expecting from people all day long is not things that regard our immediate safety. So So ponder these things. Watch how they impact your life. Because if you can move beyond expectations and beyond judgments, what are you left with? One last thing. Remember when I came back from Taiwan and I was telling my parents, about the experience and all that. And I told my mom, I said, yeah, we eat in silence, And my mother, Jewish people are not the only people that speak a lot, but, we're tend to known for that. It's something we're really strong at, which is talking a lot. And so my mother, at that time, she was probably about early 60s. And I told her, yeah, the whole meal's in silence. And she couldn't imagine having a meal in silence. And then she said, well, I guess if you're all wearing the same thing, because everyone's in robes, if you all look the same, because everybody's got their head shaved, and if you're all eating the same thing, because you are, she said, I guess there's nothing else to talk about. So I'll pause with that and just open up to questions, meditation, Buddhist practice, anything I've shared up to this point. Yeah, that was quick.
Yeah, you said not to study Buddhism, but I had this question from when Geshe-la was here.
Yeah.
So when he was talking about four vegetables and he was talking about sentient beings.
Yeah.
And then I was reading a Thich Nhat Hanh, Plum Village, and they mention people, animals, plants, and minerals. And so I was just curious how you would define sentient beings and how minerals would fit into that if it does.
Sure. Yes. Great question. Let's talk about minerals. Let me just back up also to the first thing you said, and I just want to clarify. I am not completely suggesting that you stop studying Buddhism. One must study Buddhism. What I'm suggesting is that you understand, from my understanding and perception of Buddhist practice, is that as you're studying Buddhism, it's really just a reflection and a mirror coming back to, what's your name?
Katie.
Katie. Coming back to getting to know Katie. So definitely study Buddhism, but don't think that it's just the stuff that somebody wrote about or talked about a long time ago. See how it impacts Katie's life. That's the important piece. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because I often also tell people, don't read a bunch. And I'm not saying don't read, but, 30 books, you could probably stop and then start trying to do some of the things that are in those 30 books. You usually don't need 30 more. But back to your question. So let me start here. Each Buddhist teacher, someone like Thich Nhat Hanh, each Buddhist lineage and tradition, someone like Geshe-la, they will all define things differently. Different approaches, different practices, different teachings, okay? What I can tell you, my knowledge of very technical Buddhist teachings like Pali Canon Sutra type stuff, even when I say what he said, that's also, because you realized, or maybe you don't realize, or anyone who doesn't realize this, is that when the Buddhists spoke, it wasn't like they had their iPhones there to record it. It was all memorized, 50 to 100 years. Then they came together and said, we should write this stuff down. So the sutras, the majority of them start out with, at such and such time, at such and such place, with such and such people, the Buddha once said. Meaning everything that is recorded in what people refer to as the Pali Canon, the old original teachings from 2,400 years ago, even that was somebody memorizing and retelling what they think the Buddha said. So you're, that telephone game where you sit in a circle and you start over here and you say, elephants, and over here it ends up like bicycle. You have 2,400 years of that game going on with Buddhist teachings. Okay? Make sense so far? Now, what it technically refers to is anything with consciousness, as far as sentient beings. Anything with consciousness that could eventually become a Buddha. because in very technical Buddhist teachings, going back 2,500 years ago, they all believed in rebirth or reincarnation, right? If you went up to somebody in India at that time and said you got one life and then you're going to heaven or hell, they would have thought you were cuckoo, right? You go up to most people today and say, hey, you're going to be reborn endlessly. They think you're a little crazy. So we live in a different time. This is 500 years before Christ. They were addressing very clearly that anything with consciousness would continue on the cycle of rebirth and have Buddha nature, bodhicitta, and eventually could fully awaken. So don't harm that, right? The other thing that's very important to understand is that very often this idea of, being vegan, being vegetarian, what do we eat? Do we kill? The Bible says this, but I'm going to, send love and compassion to the cow when I eat the burger. Everybody's got their way of dealing with it. I'll tell you what the Buddha did. They went begging for alms every single day, one meal a day. They went door to door, so to speak. They put their head down. They put a bowl of food up. And whatever went in that bowl, when they all gathered at the end of the day, they sat down or at the end of that time of collecting the food, they sat down, they split it all up evenly, and they ate it, whatever was there. If there was meat, if there was fish, if there was whatever, they ate what was given to them. And there were 3 factors that the Buddha said as far as eating any sort of meat, fish, anything that had been killed. And the 3 conditions were if they didn't see it be killed, if they didn't hear it be killed, and if it wasn't killed specifically for them, then they would eat what was there, right? So that was what and how the Buddha lived. And that's what he taught. Every time we do any sort of talk on like the precepts and non-harming and talk about consciousness, there's always the plant lovers and the tree lovers, and now apparently the mineral lovers that want to bring and debate that up. And that's where I bow out. I couldn't tell you a darn thing about any minerals. If they have consciousness, if they can continue to be reborn and have Buddha nature, then, the technical teachings would say, don't harm minerals.
I was wondering if it was like the properties.
The what?
Like the properties, like the chemical properties that can be repurposed and made into different things, if that's what they were referencing, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I don't know, and you can probably tell by my answer how much time I spend trying to figure out. You know what I mean?
Past this.
Beautiful question. No, it's just, yeah. The general idea is do no harm.
And can I follow up?
Please.
Is it generally believed in Buddhist practice that plants have consciousness?
No. But that doesn't mean that they don't have consciousness. That's why I said that. I spent a lot of time with college kids, and as soon as you talk about anything with consciousness, you could spend 3 hours on them debating plant consciousness.
Or something?
Yeah, so initially, no, but I'm not saying that plants don't have consciousness. I've seen where they yell and scream at the plant. Have you seen those studies on plants where they like yell and scream at this plant and they all die, and they like play beautiful music for this one and they're like happy as can be, and then they bring this one over here to this one and then they're both happy and alive? I've seen all that, right? But yeah. What do you think? Because that's what really matters.
Yeah. I think we don't understand.
Yeah.
There's
For
a lot
sure.
we don't understand.
Definitely. And I also think about, no matter how smart Siddhartha became the Buddha was, certain things were not, the science development and study and research of things that like we have today, they weren't doing 2,500 years ago. So they were working with what knowledge they had, Yeah. Other questions? That's the first time I've heard someone say minerals, though. I like that. I didn't know Thich Nhat Hanh says that, so. Yeah.
It's in the 5 mindfulness trainings.
Yeah.
And then the 14, it's in both versions. And
Yeah. That's great. If harming minerals was our biggest problem, we'd be in good shape. If that was the only thing we harmed, was minerals, I'd feel bad for the minerals, but the world would be a better place. Yeah. What else? Thoughts, questions?
I don't know how to phrase this, but I feel like when I was raised, I was not raised to have a good relationship with myself. So that's something I've kind of figured out more in adulthood. But I know Buddhist teachings would talk more about non-self, and that I know it's not true, but that makes me think like, oh, maybe I was raised correctly. But like, I know I'm trying to like marry those two concepts of like needing to know about self, but also releasing self.
Mm-hmm.
So can you speak to that?
Yeah. I mean, the teachings of non-self are incredibly difficult to embody, embrace, and put into practice, because it is literally yourself that is trying to understand and integrate non-self teachings. So it is your entire upbringing, your entire relationship to whatever you call yourself, however you identify yourself, however you refer to yourself, however you view yourself, however you judge yourself, all of your ego, all of that for your entire life, including how your parents raised you and all friends viewed you and everything, and the view of yourself. That is then meeting this teaching that says there is no self. I just want to put that into context first, even though I know that's really what you're addressing. So the question then is, well, how does that all work, right? Non-self, especially those who've never heard this teaching, there's what's called the three Dharma seals: nirvana, no self, and impermanence, right? Nirvana being liberation, freedom from suffering. Impermanence being all conditioned phenomena will come together for a period of time and then cease to exist. Everything, right? The third one is non-self. When we apply impermanence to self, we understand that the self, we are there. Non-self doesn't mean that you, again, for those who've never heard this before, it doesn't mean that you don't exist. It doesn't mean that your physical body is not there. It doesn't mean, when I was talking about where you're going to find your mind, it doesn't mean that you don't have thoughts. What it means is all of that is an illusion. It's all completely different from how you perceive it to be. So whatever your parents thought of you is not you. Whatever you think of you is not you. Whatever the stranger out there thinks of you is not you. So who are you? There is no inherent thing that you can point to that says, this is you. This is yourself. All you are, a dear friend of mine years ago used to say, all we are around non-self teachings, all we are is a trillion conditions happening endlessly over a trillion years. We are nothing more than the law of cause and effect that has continued endlessly and will continue endlessly. But what happens is we're born, and then we're like, oh, here I am, I'm a baby. And then there's these like fingers pointing at me, and then my parents are standing over me and they're like, Jeff. And then it's like, oh, I guess my name is Jeff. And then I call myself Jeff, and then I realize these are fingers. And then I spend my whole life building some identity, some ego about who I think I am based on what other people tell me, my experiences. And then I start closing in that box on that attachment to that story. And I never let that story go. I keep telling it over and over and over again. And I keep thinking that that's who I am. That's myself. Or that the parents who, whatever they taught you, then you tell yourself that that's yourself. And then you try to get away from that. And then you think you're creating a new self. There is no self to create. And there is no self to, what's the opposite of create? Uncreate? Decreate? Yeah, you get it. Yeah. There's no self to create or not create. We'll go with that. It's all just an illusion. And life is just moment to moment experiences. That's the reality. I mean, you can't really debate. I mean, we can debate anything, but it'd be really hard to debate that your life is anything other than moment to moment experiences, right? That's your life. The law of cause and effect. Every moment things happen, you react. More things happen, more reactions. That's what I say after every meditation. That is every single moment of your life. And each moment that you are reacting, that effect is creating new causes. Therefore, you have karma, the cycle of law of cause and effect. This idea of the self being this permanent thing that we must fix and solve and create and build up and defend is the greatest attachment of them all. What binds us the most to suffering is our attachment to ourselves. And everything in our conditioned way of life feeds into telling us who our self is. I talk about this all the time, but all the media, all the advertising, billions of dollars, literally, more than that, but spent on telling you what you should look like and what you should wear and what you should eat and where you should go and what you should drive and what house you should live in and what your shoes should look like and make sure your belt matches your shirt. Like that is like really, we live in a world that tells us that our belt is supposed to match our shoes. And come some certain time of the year, which I only know this because my oldest brother growing up, that after some certain time of the year, you're not supposed to wear a certain color clothes. That's just the dumbest thing in the world. Like truly, just the stupidest thing in the world. Because we get sucked into that and we believe that crap. Right? Why do we believe it? Because that's what everybody wants us to buy and look like. That's not ourselves. Our entire life, we're just trying to be whatever someone else thinks we should be. We're just moment to moment experiences. And the practice is to liberate and be free from all of that. To remove yourself from that vicious cycle that thinks that your shoes and belts should be the same color. That's, tomorrow I would say a completely different thing, but in essence, it's the same thing. Does that help? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Are those the same pants and the same jacket?
No, so same pants.
Mm-hmm.
It is a newer jacket because the other one, the zipper stopped working and it had a hole in it. And I just couldn't go to my Jewish mother's one more time and have her tell me about the hole that's in my jacket. It was a lot easier. Yeah. So I broke down. And I'm a terrible Buddhist. I bought a new jacket.
I brought you
Same color though.
I know. I brought you in and I'm like, I really wouldn't be surprised if that's like the same jacket.
I went big.
Yeah.
I think I even paid more than $20 for it too.
Yeah. The plastic stuff's nice.
Straight to Buddhist hell I'm going. Yeah. So, all right, we're going to close on that, unless there's anything else anybody wants to share or add. Preaching all the time to give away all your shirts, and I went out and bought a brand new vest.
Honestly, I thought it was a question on impermanence.
The vest,
the same pants as a moment ago.
Sign up, right? Yeah, they are, exactly. Yes, different pants, different vests. Fun times. All right, anything else? All right, we'll close. May the benefit of this practice be shared with all beings in all directions. May all beings be at peace. May all be free from suffering. May any merit gained from this practice be transferred to those who need it most. May they all be at peace. May we all be at peace and free from suffering. All right, just a few quick announcements before you head out. Our phenomenal Dharma Bum host, Robin, will enlighten us all.
I'll do my best. Hi, everyone. I have a few announcements for you. We did open the Dharma Bum Temple about 16 years ago to introduce Buddhist practice to those who show up. Those who lead are not nuns, monks, gurus, masters, or teachers, and we're not looking for students. They're simply practitioners sharing their interpretation of practice with others. Almost every night we have different classes led by people from various Buddhist traditions. We have a recovery sangha that meets several times a week for anyone battling addiction, and our food redistribution program is every Thursday at 5 o'clock. We have classes and programs every day, and everything we offer here is always free. The full schedule is on our website and posted in the entryway above the shoe rack. We also have a lending library. If you see a book you like, feel free to borrow it and then bring it back whenever you're finished with it. Please straighten your seat or cushion before you head out, and we thank you for being here. We wish you well and hope to see you all again.
Thanks, Rob.
Sure.